Good intentions without actions are the number one contributor to progress prevention. We have to take action.
Welcome to the Cleaning Up Podcast, Millionaire Secrets of the Home Services Industry, brought to you by me, Ron Holt, CEO and founder of Two Maids and a Mop, America's fastest growing cleaning company. I get a chance to sit down with home service industry pros and other entrepreneurial leaders so they can share their stories, their insight, their experiences. It's so much fun. You're going to learn so much. You're going to be inspired to take your small business into a national brand just like I did. All right, welcome back to another exciting episode of Cleaning Up, Millionaire Secrets of the Home Services Industry. I'm Ron, CEO and founder of Two Maids and a Mop, and I can't wait to talk to today's guest. Today's guest is Chad Foster. Chad is an executive at Red Hat. He's done all sorts of really cool things in his life, like, I don't know, maybe make $54 million deals. He's rose the corporate ladder. He's been a downhill skier, competition winner, you name it. He's done so many amazing things in life. Even most recently, he's the author of a great book. All of that's great, but he's done that while being blind most of his adult life. And with us here at Two Maids and a Mop going through this mindset series and this mindset challenge that we're imposing on ourselves, I can't think of a better person to talk to right now other than Chad. So Chad, welcome to the Cleaning Up Podcast today.
Thanks, Ron. I appreciate you having me. And it turns out this really is a good time to go blind.
Is that right?
It is. It is. There's a lot of technology out there that make it a good time to go blind. So, with the internet and everything that it provides, and it's all about how you think about a situation. But yeah, that's my little lighthearted, tongue-in-cheek joke. But there's a lot of truth to it, right? There's a lot of truth in every joke.
Absolutely. So Chad's book is called Blind Ambition. The subtitle, it really caught me because the words really resonated with me. So it's Blind Ambition, how to go from victim to visionary. And I really think that's an important designation because literally everyone goes through something. Whether you're an entrepreneur or not, you go through something. And there's only two directions you're going to go. You're either going to be a victim of that situation or you're going to push forward and be a visionary through that situation. I think a lot of entrepreneurs just assume they're going to be visionaries, but I believe that a lot of entrepreneurs sometimes can choose the wrong path as well and become a victim. And, I don't know if there's a science to this. I don't know if there's a formula that gets you from victim to visionary, but I believe that there is. I believe that there's an opportunity for everyone inside their hearts to use whatever painful thing they're going through as a positive thing down the road. And so I'd like to kind of talk to you about your story. And I believe that your story will not just resonate from an emotional standpoint, but I think it will also resonate from a practical standpoint as well, because so many people in the business world think life's tough. Like, man, why can't I hire someone? Why can't I build my business? Why isn't my business going in the direction I hoped it would? Mm-hmm. So many whys. Why not instead of why nots? Like, let's go forward. Let's figure it out. So why don't we jump back to, where you were as a teenager? Because I know life was a little bit different for you as a teenager there in Tennessee, and we'll roll into where we are today in life. And I'll just kind of let you take the mic and run.
Sure. So growing up, I could see, during the day, I played sports. Played football and basketball, played soccer. I wrestled, ran track, drove a car, rode jet skis, enjoyed a lot of things that sight grants everyone or most everyone. And in my late teens, early 20s, my eyesight really began to fade. I was studying at the University of Tennessee. I was wanting to go into the medical field, was studying pre-med, when everything faded to black. My eyesight literally went totally away due to an inherited retinal condition. And all of a sudden, my self-identity, everything was called into question. I wanted to go into the medical field to help other people, but now I wasn't even sure if I could help myself. Not even sure how I would walk around, how would I get from point A to point B. I'd seen myself as this hard-charging young man hoping to make a difference in the world. And it's hard to see yourself as a hard-charging young man when you cannot even walk safely and independently. And so that was a really difficult time for me, coming to grips with the realization that the hopes and dreams that I had for myself were no longer possible, robbed by this inherited genetic condition for which there was no cure. And that was a difficult time for me. And I felt initially I was embarrassed. I was ashamed of my situation. Wasn't sure what I was going to be. What would I do? We ask kids all the time, what do you want to be when you grow up? And none of them, and I mean none of them, said they want to grow up and be a blind person, right? That is not on people's wish list. So I had to accept the reality of my situation somehow. I had to reimagine a future for myself. I had to mourn the loss of my imagined future self and figure out how I was going to step forward. So that time period in my life was an incredibly difficult time in my life, but thankfully, and we'll get into this, but I figured out a path forward. I'm actually happier now and I'm more successful now back when I could see, and which is pretty remarkable. If you had told me that back then as I was going through that, I would have thought you were crazy, but that's actually where I'm at today. And there's a lot I've learned along that journey.
So you were in college when things started to change for you. Like you said, you had a dream to be a medical professional, maybe a doctor. What was that transformation like? I mean, what type of emotional shock did you experience during the change from being able to see visually to where you are now?
Well, it started off with, I think, denial, trying to hide the fact that my eyesight was fading. And then it was anger, and then it was sadness. I went through all the standard phases of loss. I was mourning, and I was embarrassed. I was ashamed of my situation. I was trying to hide it. And then I went to, finally, after I ended up getting a medical withdrawal from my classes, I had to get 85 hours of credit essentially flushed down the drain because I switched from pre-med into business. And, microbiology is not very applicable in business. And so there are lots of classes like that, anatomy, physiology, all these classes that were no longer useful in the business world. And I switched to business because I wasn't sure what I could do, let alone what I wanted to do. And as I was going through that, I ended up deciding that, I'm not going to be very effective with a cane. I didn't learn how to use a cane growing up. Again, I was someone who could see, drove a car, so I didn't really see a need for using a walking cane. So I decided that the best thing for me would be to get a seeing eye dog. And so I went to Leader Dogs for the Blind in Rochester, Michigan, where I learned a lot more than just how to use a guide dog. So I get there on campus and I arrive, this woe is me mentality soaks every word that I speak, every thought that I have. And I'm asking myself, why me? Why me? Poor me. I have this poor me mentality. And it all began with, the fact that I was going blind at, basically in my prime. And I went there and I started to meet some of the people around me. Many of them had far worse conditions than I did. Some of them had cognitive impairments and they were blind. Some of them were on dialysis because they had diabetes that robbed them of their eyesight. Some of them were deaf and blind, and they were getting a guide dog to be independent. Now, for these people, we had to talk with an interpreter who would then sign into their hands, and that was the only way that they could communicate, but they were getting a guide dog to travel independently. And so meeting these people and experiencing firsthand the living courage that they displayed every day, facing their everyday reality head on, was a tipping point for me. I started to re-examine my own life. I'd been given 20-something years of eyesight, all of my hearing and cognitive faculties, and many blessings that I could look back on and be thankful for. And I think that moment, experiencing that firsthand, where you're living with someone for 26 days, it's one thing to have a conversation on the street or listen to a podcast or read an article in a newspaper or online magazine. But when you live with someone and you see those challenges, you experience those challenges firsthand for 26 days, it really etches it into your brain. And for me, that was my tipping point. That was the moment that I realized that happiness and success are not They're not feelings and they're not events. They're mindsets. You either have a mindset of happiness and a mindset of success, or you don't. You either choose to deliberately frame your perception and push yourself through whatever obstacle gets in your way, or you don't. It's all up to you. None of us can control what life deals us, but we can all control how we choose to respond and how we choose to show up. And I found that for me, the real anchor point of all of that was that experience at Leader Dogs. And in fact, the deep sense of gratitude that experience left me with.
Oh gosh, that's you couldn't have said it any better. And considering the situation you're in, I'm assuming that a lot of people who go through that, in some cases, take the opposite path. There is a victimhood that occurs, and honestly, I don't know if there's any reason to blame them to feel that way, because it's unfair. So
it is, but life's not fair. A lot of people out there, Ron, think life's supposed to be fair. It's not. No one said it's supposed to be fair. None of us start from the same position, right? We all have different starting positions, different baskets of circumstances. The important thing is, how do we move along our journey? But you're right, life's not fair. And I showed up and I was asking myself, why me, with the tone of a victim? And that's natural. That's normal. If you're not asking that question when you're initially faced with something, then that would be pretty unnatural. But I think over time, as I started to have these discoveries inside of me, I learned to ask the same question, but shift the tone from someone who felt victimized to someone who was just genuinely curious. Why did this happen to me? And so then I started reflecting and looking for moments of discovery inside myself as to how I choose to explain the situation of my life to myself. And that, turns out, is the very foundation of resilience.
Well, things worked out for you. You used that experience, from what I remember, to move on. Finally, you graduated from Tennessee there and was offered a job. Eventually found yourself down in Atlanta. Even that wasn't the end, though. Like, you did the impossible. You changed a major, finished a degree without eyesight, got a great job. But even there were some real challenges, because life was all just beginning. You were just growing into a young man. So what type of challenges did you experience as you entered the workplace?
Yeah, there were lots of challenges. I think the first thing, relearning how to learn without being able to see was pretty significant. The fact that I did that and then made no less than an A in all of my business classes made me feel pretty good about my prospects. And then getting a job offer from a top consulting firm. Hey, I was riding high there for a little while. And then I realized that I was signing up to move to Atlanta, where I knew nobody who could help me really learn the system. I didn't have a support structure in Atlanta. It was a big city. I was used to living in Knoxville. I'd signed up for a job that required a lot of travel, 75% travel. I had just gone blind a year and a half earlier, had a guide dog, but I had never traveled independently like that, where you're crisscrossing the country in and out of airports, the world's busiest airport. How would I get my groceries? How would I launder my clothes? How would I, find my way, to get lunch, or any of the things that a lot of people take for granted? And as I started thinking about all these obstacles that laid in front of me, I started to become really terrified and wondered at whether or not I had what it takes to follow through. And for a moment, I actually considered backing out. And as I was thinking about that, I started, I was talking to family and friends, and they were asking me if I was excited. And of course, I projected confidence and excitement, but inside I was teeming with fear, because I was scared to death of failing. But the thing that I came to, the realization that occurred to me at that point in time, I was 25 years old. I discovered that there were two fears. There's the fear of failing, and then the fear of not knowing what was actually possible. And so when I did the exercise of zooming forward in my mind to when I'm, say, 70 or 80 years old, and looking back on my life, what is the fear I can live with? What failure, what decision can I live with? Is it the fear of failing in pursuit of my goals, or the fear of not even knowing what's possible because I didn't have the courage to try? And for me, the dominating fear that I allowed to drive my decision making was the fear of not knowing. I was more fearful of not knowing what was possible. And so I used that to fuel my energy to step through the fear and move to Atlanta and take on this new job and learn how to navigate the world around me independently, learn how to travel, learn how to do my job, which is a very technical job, learning how to write code, to engineer software without really being able to see my computer screen at all, and being successful in a fast-paced environment, which was very intimidating. Obviously, it's intimidating for everyone. It's a little more intimidating when you can't see where you're going or see your computer screen.
Yeah, I almost wonder if this experience that you went through, it almost seems like it refocused you and it gave you a higher level of purpose in your life, and it actually made you stronger. Even though when you lose your vision, things change for you. And in your case, you used it to become a much stronger, much more positive-minded individual. That I wonder if you did not go through this experience, if you'd have the same outcome in life.
I don't think I would have. I would flat out say there's no way, because going blind forced me to reevaluate my perspective on happiness and success, as I mentioned earlier, my focus, my effort, and my determination. Not many people in college have to switch majors, start 3 years in the hole with studies, and then relearn how to learn. That was a pretty staggering blow. And then have to learn how to engineer software just to be able to use a computer. I had to do that out of college as I began my first job. And so that experience forced me to reevaluate how much determination I needed to apply to my situation. And what I would do is just look around and say, well, okay, I don't really know how to write code. I was a business major. Before that, I wanted to go into the medical field. And now I'm faced with this basket of circumstances. What am I going to do? I have a computer. It doesn't work with every application that I need to use to do my job. I have a couple of options. I can fold up my tent and go home, or I can try to learn how to write code to engineer this software so that I can do my job more effectively. And then who knows what's possible? I don't know what's on the other side of that next goal, but what is my next best action that I can take? Is it to quit, or is it to double down? And so it taught me that, I don't know that I'm wired to just fold up shop and go home. I'm not sure it's in me, but I think it's within all of us to learn how to cultivate more resilience and determination. And it all starts with the stories that we tell ourselves about our situation. We all have circumstances in our lives that are unfavorable. Not everything goes as we plan. And the important thing is the meaning we attach to those circumstances. The facts are much less relevant than the stories we tell ourselves about those circumstances. And those insights had begun to get sown with me at this point in time, but they weren't quite as crystallized as they became later on in life, as we'll get to.
Yeah, well, later on, you write code, you secure billions of dollars in contracts with couple different companies that you work with. And here's the cool part, guys. He's the first blind graduate ever at Harvard Business School leadership program. For anyone that doesn't understand what that means, this is a super selective program that just doesn't take anyone. And you actually there's a whole process to just be admitted into it. And then, of course, once you're inside of it, it takes over your life. And Chad did it all. The literal first blind graduate ever. And to me, that by itself is a book. What was that process like? How did it even evolve to get to that place where you thought that would be something you wanted to take on in life?
Yeah, it was a fun time for sure. I had just been given by the University of Tennessee the Accomplished Alumni Award back in 2014, and I was talking to my manager at the time, back when I worked for a defense IT company, SRA International, and I was telling him about it. And, he said, you know what, you've got something cooking here. I think you've got an opportunity to help some people. and you've helped us bring in over $45 billion in contracts. Think about what we can do for you. I want to try and help you get to the next level. So what can we do for you? And for some crazy reason, I came up with the idea of send me to Harvard. And for some crazier reason, they said, okay. He said, all right. So they agreed to pick up the tab. And then I started going through the application process. And then the fear started to kick in again. And the fear of, oh my gosh, do I really want to go through with this? What if I don't get accepted? As you mentioned, Harvard's very selective. Here I was a blind guy coming in and I've had success in the business world, but what experience or what preconceived notions would they have with someone who can't see? And what's my opportunity to be successful and risking getting approval? And I had to get approval from the CEO of the company to go do this because, the cost to go to Harvard is not immaterial. And so the CEO signed off on it. And what if I didn't get admitted? What if I was not selected? And so the risk of public failure or embarrassment was real. And it started to occur to me. But as it happened, I was allowed into the program and began to prepare. And as you said, it takes over a big part of your life. I was working full time. My job was not a 9-to-5 job. I worked 65 hours a week doing proposal work on large, complex technology projects. I also work out every day, 5 a.m. in the morning. And then I've got a family and, daughter and wife. And on top of that, I'm doing this program with HBS. And it was a full plate. It was definitely a full plate, going through all of the academic requirements, getting the learning in, and then the on-campus experiences. And it was very rewarding and fulfilling. Obviously, we talked about the shades of gray in business and how to navigate the shades of gray. And one of the really pivotal moments there when I was at HBS was the experience I had when learning about authentic leadership with Bill George, who is the former CEO of Medtronic, the world's largest medical supply company. He was their CEO for 10 years and decided to go on into academics and teach leadership. And we were studying his book, Discover Your True North, when it occurred to me that I've had a lot of success in creating sort of hard business results. And I'd always had people tell me that I was inspiring, which I never really took seriously because I hadn't opened myself up to that dimension of myself. But sitting in his class, it hit me like a ton of bricks that I needed to do more. My purpose, my why, the reason that I went blind is because I think I can help other people live happier and more successful lives. And I hadn't really put any effort into that. And so that discovery, that moment of insight came in that class. And since then, it's put me on a different trajectory of my life where I'm hoping to reach people, motivate people, teach people about resilience and mindset and the power of using obstacles as opportunities for growth. And all of that happened there while on campus at HBS.
Well, it doesn't stop there. That should be enough. Like I said, that's a book by itself just to accomplish that phase of life. But here's the crazy part. You're an avid downhill skier. Is that real?
That is real. That is not a typo. It's not a joke. I learned how to ski 7 years ago, 8 years ago now, 7 years ago now. First time I'd ever skied, obviously I was blind, 38 years old, and decided, my friend called me and said, hey, I'm at Aspen at a buddy's house, and they have a program here called Challenge Aspen. Are you interested? And my first thought was, that doesn't sound really safe. I can't see where I'm going. I'm a pretty adventurous personality, but yeah, just, hurtling myself down the side of a mountain at a high rate of speed without being able to see where I'm going doesn't sound incredibly secure. And so the more I learned about it and clicked down into the details, the more I learned that they have a system for it. Ski Pro teaches me how to ski, first of all. So I don't just put on a pair of skis and try and figure it out. Like a lot of people, I have a Ski Pro that teaches me the right technique. She was phenomenal. I wear a Bluetooth earpiece and a microphone to communicate with one another so that she can tell me which way to go. Very importantly, I have an incredible helmet. It's really good if you're a blind skier to have a good helmet. I have a good helmet because there's a lot of falling along the way. And I'll say skiing provides a lot of great metaphors and examples of life, right? All of us are scared of the steep, scary hills in our lives, and having the courage to face those fears head on can provide some of the most fulfilling experiences of our lives. And I've learned that through skiing. And now obviously I'm 7 years deep. And last year I was there. We ski blacks and double blacks even. And this is in Colorado. I've skied in Utah as well, Park City. I've done some skiing in Austria and the Austrian Alps when I was there for work. So I tend to get around now. It's a big passion of mine where whenever I can get a pair of skis on, that's exactly what I'm going to do, because there's not a more thrilling sport that I've ever done.
That is amazing. So what if technology fails you? Has that ever occurred?
Yeah, there have been times, once or twice, a handful of times, when the battery dies on the technology, and you just like you want to flirt with your edge of control with skiing, but then you also have to have this tremendous wave of pragmatism that says, all right, when in doubt, you have to stop. And that's why it's really important, before you take on any terrain, to learn the right technique, to make sure you can execute a stop. You've got the right communication and protocol. Trust and communication is crucial when you're skiing like that, when someone's giving you directions. And we've had occasion, we're coming off the mountain. It's whiteout conditions. It's late in the afternoon. It's super cold. So our batteries died, or we're in the process of dying, and the wind's whipping. And at the time, we didn't realize how much wind could play a factor in the ability to hear someone, because you think about a microphone and the wind hitting the microphone. If it's an omnidirectional microphone, creates this big crackle. And if you're going 50 miles an hour down a mountain and the wind is whipping at whatever the speed is, and it's hitting the microphone, it can make it hard to hear what the next turn is. And if you're going 50 miles an hour, it's pretty important to know whether it's a left or a right. And there was a time when, we're coming off the mountain in this whiteout, and I wasn't sure whether it was left or right. And, sometimes when you get that cold sweat that just instantly pops up and goes down your spine because for some reason you have this feeling that you're about to die. I had that feeling on the mountain. And so I did a hockey stop and said, look, I have no idea whether you called for a left or a right. And I wasn't really willing to gamble it. But you have to be, bold and courageous, but also you can't be an idiot either, right? You got to know when to lock it down and play it safe, live to fight another day. And I've had that happen a couple of times. And since then, we've learned better technique. We've figured out how to get microphones that shield from the wind. We've learned to recharge the batteries at lunchtime, because in cold conditions, battery life can vary. So, you learn, but you've got to be able to live to learn and fight another day too.
Man, that's what I love about your story. Your life is full of growth. You just continue to grow. I call it a life full of purpose, but the truth is you're just continually evolving and growing, and like you said, learning. And if everyone could have that mentality, man, how good would this world be? How strong would we be as a community? So I want to ask you a couple of really quick questions, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
So, we're talking about this story, and it's super inspiring, of course, and emotional. It tugs at the heartstrings for sure. It's a great story, but there's somebody out there that's probably going through something similar, or maybe it's not even similar. Maybe it's not even nearly as heavy. Maybe it's something inside their business, but it's still something.
Right.
And it's enough for them to think about that terrible, terrible 4-letter word, quit. What's the first step? What's the first step you took? What's the first step someone else can take to avoid taking that direction?
Well, I think it gets down to, how do they want to identify? What is their identity? We talk about identity a lot. Identity drives a lot of how we see ourselves. Do you see yourself as a smoker? Do you see yourself as an athlete? Do you see yourself as someone who exercises every day, who takes care of themselves? That tends to be the single most important factor in determining your actions in a given situation. How do you see yourself? And so, are you comfortable seeing yourself as a quitter? And that's a hard question to ask yourself. but that's real, right? I didn't sign up for my situation. I would not have signed up for my situation. But the way that I responded to that situation, the way that we can all choose to respond to our situations, gets into fundamentally, how do we choose to see ourselves? How do we choose to identify? And, whether it's quitting or anything else, it all kind of starts with, what are the stories that you tell yourself about the situation? Is this situation bigger than me? Is this how I want to identify? Do I want to regret giving up for the next X number of years of my life? Or am I willing to put in just a little bit more effort? I mean, the difference between success and failure is picking yourself up just one more time. I've failed hundreds of times in my life. I failed hundreds of times. I fail all the time. In fact, I'll say, if you're not failing every now and then you're not aiming high enough. You should be failing, because if you never fail, then you're never taking any chances. If you're never taking any chances, you're never risking the amount of growth that you need to be fulfilled and happy. I personally believe that if I never had obstacles in my life would not be rewarding and fulfilling. Who wants to have a life with no obstacles and everything handed to them on a silver platter? I don't. I wouldn't want that. How fulfilling would it be if I never had to stretch myself and grow? I want obstacles. I want an opportunity to stretch my comfort zone and to grow. And that involves telling myself a story that is better than I'm just too small for these circumstances. So I'll give you a quick example. When I went blind, I could have chosen to tell myself that I went blind because I have incredibly bad luck and I'm going to be a victim. Or I could have chosen to tell myself that I went blind because I'm one of the very few people on the planet with the strength and the toughness to overcome it and help other people. Now, technically, both of those stories are correct. Which one should I live by? The one that frames me up to be a victim and keeps me trapped, or the one that frames me up as a visionary and allows me to bounce back from my circumstances? I chose to tell myself the second story. And guess what? When I started telling myself a story of, this happened to you, Chad, because you're strong enough to deal with it, all of a sudden I've taken this perceived disadvantage of blindness and I've reframed it into a strength. I went blind because I'm strong enough. Now, all of a sudden, I've reframed my situation for me to take on whatever life throws at me. It doesn't have to be blindness. It could be whatever happens to me, because I've started creating a narrative in my own mind about my ability to thrive in any condition because of my inner strength and my toughness and my determination. So we have to be very careful about the stories that we tell ourselves in our lives, because we will all become those stories.
Let's say we've decided to make this thing happen. We've had a lot of bad luck. Our business has never really shown any promise, but today's the day. Today's the day that tomorrow is going to be better. What do we do? In my opinion, I'm going to kind of lead you here a little bit, but I just want to get this out there. I think the brain and the heart are like any other muscles in our body. You know, nobody has any problem admitting that in order to be stronger in your chest, you got to lift some weights. If you want to be a better long distance runner, it's probably a good idea to run some long distances and do it on a consistent basis. But when it comes to mindset, it's almost like this foreign subject that nobody really wants to think about other than a keynote here or two. And they hear it, they get inspired, maybe they shed a tear, then they go try to run through the wall and they get hit right in the face and they go, what was I thinking? So we've made the decision. We're ready to go. We're not going to quit. How do we keep the stamina to keep practicing, to keep training, to keep improving that mindset that's needed to keep growing a business or a life?
Good intentions without actions are the number one contributor to progress prevention. We have to take action. Every success in life starts with the right mindset, but it also requires the right. Well, once we have the right mindset, it will lead to words, and then it requires actions and behaviors, which will create the right outcomes. We have to have good habits that are anchored to the right mindset that we create. And so some of the things that we can do, one of the first things I think people should do is figure out, when do I show up at my best? And I did this several years ago after going through a leadership class. Journal every day. before you go to bed, journal, only takes 5 minutes, and write down, how did I feel today? Did I feel at my best? And if so, what was my daily routine like? What did I do last night before I went to bed? What did I do today? What were the foods that I ate? What put me at my best self? That's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to figure out the formula for your best self. When you're in a meeting, when you're with a client and you feel like you are firing on all cylinders, you're on fire, right? Well, how did you end up there? And how can you intentionally recreate the conditions that put you in that situation? And by journaling, you can uncover that. You can learn. And I did, for me, what puts me in that situation. I get in bed early. I get in bed at 9:30, 9 o'clock every night. I get up at 5 a.m. for my workout. I take some quiet time in the morning for some mindfulness. I take care, of me before I start taking care of everybody else. I wake up my children to get my kids to school and start doing what I need to do for my corporate responsibilities. But it's like when you fly, everybody here has probably flown. What do they tell you when it's time, if the masks drop from the ceiling, right? Everybody knows, they say, secure your mask before you secure the masks of others. People need to learn how to start securing their own masks. How can I show up at my best self? I need to be my best self every day. What does that formula look like? And it starts with understanding from real-time experiences, when do I think I'm performing at my best, and then start creating that formula over time where you can increase the likelihood that you're showing up at your best self. That's the first thing I would do.
Chad, you've got a phenomenal story. You've written a fantastic book. It kept me engaged the entire time. I'm a book reader, but I'll be honest, sometimes I get so excited about books, I stop reading the one I was excited about initially and move on to the next one. In your case, I devoured it. It was fantastic from start to end. So congratulations on such a fantastic book. It's called Blind Ambition. I hope everyone listening has an opportunity to go out and purchase it and use it. Not just read it, but use it to their advantage, whether they're inside a business or just if they need something better in their life. So anyone that wants to connect with you, Chad, I'd love for them to have a chance to do that. What can our listeners do to connect with you?
They can log on at my website, which is chadefoster.com. And there they'll find all of my social media handles, Instagram and Facebook. I'm at Find Chad E. Foster. Twitter is at Chad E. Foster. I'm on LinkedIn as well. They go to my website, they can find the book links there. We're at all the retailers. It's on Amazon. It's at Barnes & Noble. It's Apple Books, Bookshop. It's all over the place, anywhere that they buy books. But all those links are on my website, or they can log on to Amazon or Barnes & Noble and search from there as well.
Well, Chad, you keep on skiing downhill. You're doing a great job with life, and you're an inspiration to me, and I know you are to everyone listening to this show today. So, congrats on living a life of purpose, and hopefully we'll get to connect with one another again down the road.
Sounds great. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you, Chad.
Kyle Davis here from Business Development. Thank you so much for listening to the Cleaning Up Podcast. If you found this episode valuable, then please subscribe on your favorite listening platform, and please share it with your friends. If you're ever interested in going into business for yourself and purchasing a franchise, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can get a hold of me at phone number 205-870-8643, email KyleD@ineedamade.com, or visit us online at twomatesfranchise.com to learn more.